does something. It does some kind of arrangement where, okay, this present moment is shaking me up. Let me redefine it in past terms so I can make it slip myself into the past, really. It's not like you're actually making it happen. You're just stepping out of the present. As long as you can do that, your imagination can run wild. But if you're in the present moment, there is no imagination. There's only creation. There's a big difference. Fears are imagined. There's no fearful creation. This was not created out of fear. This whole life was not created out of fear. It was created out of love. We know this, don't we? So that's who we are. Now, has the world turned fearful? Yeah. Does it have adversaries? Many. Yeah, I am absolutely convinced there are entities, whether they have bodies or not, ships or not, is irrelevant. Whether they come down on spaceships and say, "Howdy, Earthlings, we are here to eat you," or not, is irrelevant. You can feel it. You can feel every time that you go to step into your heart, there's like a beast there that tries to scare you out of it. To me, that's when I arrived at that beast, that's when I really picked up everything Carlos gave me. And I started picking up the energetics, started trying to harness some of that personal power, because that beast is huge. Huge. And it is very formidable. And anyone who doubts it, well, are you awake, enlightened, satisfied, and have no doubt anymore? Because if you have any of that, the only reason is you know how formidable that beast really is. It becomes very real at a certain point. What kills that beast? I guess kills isn't the right word. What makes it go back to the illusionary state it came from? Love. And what is that? The fullness of your life force. Where does that thing attack you at? Not in the past. Not in the future. Right? Can I eat food that was made 2 weeks ago? That I ate 2 weeks ago? Can I eat it again? How about the right? How about the pizza that I'm gonna make tomorrow? Can I eat that right now? No. So, and here's something very interesting. A little spooky, but interesting nonetheless. So, what better way to consume somebody presently, especially if you don't want it? Right? Say this entity comes to devour your energy. But as long as you're aware, it can't. Right? And the place it's gonna consume you is where you're at, the present moment. Right? So, if you won't allow it to happen, you would never allow that to happen, then the only way it can feed on you is to keep you enamored of the past or projected in the future. Because as long as you are enamored of the past or projected in the future, very little awareness is present. Yeah, your life force is here, but you're not. You wouldn't even know you were being eaten. You would not even know that your energy is being consumed by something. Right? Against your will, yeah, but your will is not present, so it's not a matter of consequence. Your will is buried in the past, hanging out in the future. So who's watching over you here? God? Really? You know how many people have said that and then got hit by a bus? You know how many people have said that and then had to be taken down off their throne because they were lying horribly and hurting people in it? We had one here, right? He's back. Mm-hmm. Holy moly. It tells you a lot about this town. It's desperate. But in its desperation, it hides. Now, when it's sick of itself, it'll come out. Hopefully that looks very pleasing, very pleasant. So, as long as you're not in the present moment, it can consume you and there's no fight you could put up because you're not there.
You know, Chris, like you're talking about it's a label, but disassociation. You know, people disassociate when you do it because they're so fearful of the present moment.
Because that's where the beast
and
is.
They won't remember it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a total, you know, and then maybe 20 years later they'll come back and go, wow, and they can't rationalize that it is really true.
Right.
Until they get to the well-being, until they get to that being.
And like you were saying, the beast has such an enormous voice. I call it the voice.
And an appetite to fit.
Oh my God. It was just, but like you said, that's poignant in the sense that it's always in the past or the future. And the voice, when it talks about, like with my issues this morning, it was like, oh yeah, you screwed up so much now, even though you tried to do everything right. Now people are just gonna have to come in your house and just like buy the dishes out of there, and while you sit in the corner with a blanket over you because you're just so not doing this right. And then what will happen to you? You're just like gonna be like the next bag lady. Oh my God, you know. And then it's like, and then I jerked back and I went, but you're just the voice, and you're talking about the future. And right now, my body says that I feel okay. But it had me enraptured to the point where I couldn't stop crying because it was like, oh my God. And then it was this whole horrible movie.
You're watching your old life dissolve, aren't you?
Yeah. And
Isn't
it was like,
It's
and then the
spooky.
ego, yeah, and then the ego said, yeah, so there. You
But
know?
it's all nonsense.
But it is all nonsense. And then I just did some sage, and you know, and it's like, okay, now, thank you for sharing. Let's move on. You know? But it was this huge, horrible, you know, apocalypse. It's just going to happen. And it was all the voice. And supposedly, that voice is installed in our psyche by the time we're about 4. And then it just gets more and more empowered, you know, where we get the parents telling us or the society telling us or whatever. Before you know it, wow, it teams up with the ego and you just have this monster that shakes you to the core.
Yep, it grows. It basically, I have 2 daughters. One's 14 now, and one's 11. It happened more so to the 11-year-old than it did to the 14-year-old. The 11-year-old, basically, I would find her in my bed every night. And she stopped. I mean, your kids would climb in your bed in the middle of the night. They usually stopped at about 6, 7. And she did. And then about 8, she started doing it again. What's going on here? So I asked her, what's happening? She goes, something happens. I said, what's that? She says, I can't really explain it. So I said, all right, well, tonight I want you to sleep in your room. She went to sleep in her room. And I stood outside the door. And I watched. And I had it happen to me as a kid, too. So it was very intense. But I was in a place I could deal with it. Right? And it has to do with basically engaging my daughter's being without engaging her mind. Right? It's something I learned from Carlos. Not even learned, it just became apparent at a certain point. That there was this energetic activity going on that I just knew somehow. It was like riding a bike. I was like, wow, I remember this. But when I was a kid, I used to have this dark figure that would stand at the top of the stairs. It would only happen when I came home alone. I was the youngest of 3. Both of my sisters had after-school activities. I was never interested in any of that stuff, so I never had any. I'd come home from school. My parents both worked till about 6 or 7 at night. And, it was always in the fall or the winter, when the sun would drop earlier and earlier and earlier. So now it's dark at 5 o'clock. No one gets home till 7. But it's dark out at 5. And when in the summer or in the spring, during the school year, it wouldn't ever bother me because it never got dark before 7. So all the kids would be out playing. So we would just all out be playing in the street, you know, or playing hide and go seek or football, or, you know, what kids do back in the 70s, before computers and video games.
Yeah.
We actually went out and played and built forts and, you know, beat each other up and did the whole thing. Instead of bullying each other online, we actually did it. But anyway, so on those times it would never happen, because by the time I got home, you know, when I came home, the lights, you know, it was still light out, and I stayed out, and all the kids could stay out until it got dark. Right? That was the 70s. You could play until the street lights come on, and then you have to come home because it's dark out. So it would be like 5 o'clock. It's dark. All the other kids would have to go home. So that means I have to go home, but no one gets home until 7. So I'd walk in the front door, and there'd be this 7-foot shadow standing at the top of the stairs, looking at me. Right? And it was very strange because I always felt a pull from it. Like it pulling something out of me. And I would start to become very tired and really disassociated with my body. Like, ugh. And I remember every single time that would happen, the hair on the back of my neck would stand up. My head would immediately do this, bow down to this thing. And it would basically laugh at me while it was sucking out the life force. It was just a shadow. It had no appendages. It was just a form of a person, but without any definition. It's like a blob, like what you see as a shadow.
Kind of
It's-
like the Death Eaters in Harry Potter.
Huh.
That's exactly how they explained it.
I called them mud shadows, because that's what they were there, to consume life force. So this thing would stand up at the top of the stairs, and all I could ever do was get on my bike, go back out the front door, and ride my bike under the street light until someone else came home. As long as someone else came home and I walked in, it wouldn't be there. And I'd feel this sense of relief. Well, I told my mom about it once, and she wanted me to, you know, she was very worried about it, to the point where I didn't mention it again. Because I didn't want her to worry. It wasn't like I was dying or anything. It was just something spooky. And, you know, your mind chalks it up to it's your imagination. So this went on and on and on. And then it got brave, because one night I go to bed, right, and I shut the door to my room, but the hall light was on. So you could see the light coming in from the frame of the door, because, you know, you don't have weather stripping on inside doors. So all the light would pour through the crack. And it shows up at the foot of my bed, right? And I'm like this. I mean, instantaneously paralyzed. And I can't take my eyes off of it. There's a street light out my window, and there's the light coming in from the door. And I never noticed this as it was standing at the top of the stairs. It's sucking all the light into it. All of it. And it looms over me, and I could feel it pulling me, right? And it was weird. It was like any sense of the happiness a child feels was going away. The sense of wonder, the sense of spontaneous presence was going away. I could feel it leaving me. And I hated it. It made me cry like crazy. And I don't know if it was that I was blessed. That's what I decided to just, I think I'd chalk it up to. One night this is going on, this ball of light is floating outside the window. It comes through the window.
Wow.
Comes to the foot of my bed, and it was weird. It was like I heard like a loud ringing in my head. And then a popping noise. Right? And then when the popping noise happened, it was like the stream that this thing was stealing from me, it stopped stealing it. It was like all that energy snapped back into me on that pop. And just when it popped, I mean, I could feel energy coming out of my fingertips. And that little ball of light turned into a dude. He's standing there in my bedroom. The reason I have long hair and a beard is to emulate that.
Wow.
I mean, really, I can't think of any other reason. People, why do you have long hair? And the only thing I can chalk it up to is because that person saved my life. And I wanted to be like that. That's what I wanted to be when I grew up. I want to be like that. Because it came in, put its hand on my forehead. I was bathed in light like I've never seen before as a kid.
Wow.
Right? And I looked up, and I wasn't speaking. Just said, worry not. Don't worry. Don't be afraid.